Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. So glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here too. We were introduced by the amazing Ruby Warrington, and Ruby was like, "You need to talk to Lindsay. She's got some amazing insights on what death is from, yeah, your perspective, your work.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you have such an amazing, wide and varied career. I mean, I was reading what you've been up to from like Emmy-nominated film director, Cambridge University psychology PhD, yeah, graduate of the Satie Center for Buddhist Studies. I was intrigued by your eco chaplaincy program. Oh my God, the list is endless. It's fascinating. Where I kind of want to ask straight off the bat, like, what's where you're at now and what you're studying and what you're doing and the gifts and the information and the
Mm.
knowledge that you're sharing with the world. How do
Mm.
you feel like all these different parts of your world? How do you feel like all the different parts of what you've been brought to today? How does that bring you into the now to share what you want to share? Like, are you taking what are the bits that stand out to bring you to be like, okay, this is why I'm talking about what I'm talking about right now?
Mm. Yeah, good question. I really feel that my life has been kind of a meandering, labyrinthine, kind of constellate spiral of really exploring these edges of, I would say, life and death in the sense of what creates more vitality, what actually needs to be shed, decomposed, composted, alchemized, transformed, and how do those mix together? And this can take any form. This can take the filmmaking I've done. This can take the work as an eco-doula. This can take research into a sensuous reciprocal relationship with the earth. This can take the form of psychedelic assisted facilitation, which is something I also do. But I think the kind of jewels or the concretize, let's say, emergences or arisings that feel congruent and coherent across the whole seem to be this continual weaving between, yeah, what brings vitality and what needs to be composted. And this question around death, I'm so intrigued that you have this show because this is, of course, something that I think our culture is terrified to consider in a real way. And is not something to be resisted, rather, but embraced. And what does that actually look like? We're
Yeah.
all going to die. Every single thing we love, every single one we love, we will lose. And how to live within that reality is part of, I think, the core of what it is to be here.
Yeah, completely, like really redefining our relationship with death, with dying, and how that fits with the earth, with the
Mm.
planet that we have, with nature that we see dying on a daily basis. Like, you go to the supermarket or you go to a florist and you buy a bunch of flowers and you have the flowers in your house, for example, and then over time they die. And it's
Mm.
interesting how we can accept, for many of us, like the flowers dying in our living room, but when we come to it on a greater, bigger concept of that, it can, well, it obviously it can freak us out, and there can be a strange, we have a strange relationship with that. Yeah,
Mm.
it's definitely big.
Mm.
One one other question that came up, that I wanted to, is there a memory of death for you personally that's brought you into wanting to talk about this change, this transformation, this, to use your word, composting, bringing it back to earth? When you scan back, is there a standout memory from childhood where you first encountered death, or something where you've encountered that in work, in relationship to nature, which is really fueled intuitively or fueled spiritually without realizing, something that's driving you forward to share this message on?
Yeah, there's so many. And Yeah, one that really arises is the loss of my grandmother and my grandfather that happened within a really short span, about a year and a half apart. And they have this gorgeous love story. They met when they were 78 and spent the last like 15 years of their life in this really beautiful, sweet, kind of like cosmic love bubble. But the liminality and the kind of partnership, I saw my grandmother really partner the process of death and embrace what was arising in her, which became this radiant luminosity towards kind of the final days of her life, and this unbelievable, very saturated and like crystalline love really enveloped her. I could feel it when I'd be in the room with her. I could see it. It was like almost visible. And so this death portal that became really obvious, like there's something changing here. And I really believe that love never dies. It simply changes forms. And so with death, we get the opportunity to discover like this same love in a whole new form. And the honor and how it changed me to be with her as a companion as she left this physical form, I think opened me to the vast potentiality that exists, to not be scared of death, to be close to it. And that kind of opened me then to pursue closeness to death in my personal life, which eventually brought me into relationship with death as it relates to the earth. So it kind of took a love affair with someone in a human form who is dying to eventually kind of bridge me into being able to see the same with the earth. I think it can be challenging for people sometimes to feel a sense of personalization or close subjective bond with the earth. It can feel really vast or a bit abstract. And so I really encourage people to develop like a very personal relationship with earth. And therefore, what is lost becomes more deeply felt instead of kind of abstracted and out there.
Yeah, that's deep. That's really amazing that you say that around, yeah, making it personal to the earth, because there can be, you know, the eco crisis that we're experiencing right now, and the connection to that. There does feel this level of separation where it's like, that won't happen to me, I won't be part of that. Or on the flip side, a lot of people think, but you know, I don't know whether in the research that's been coming up, also people who are deeply affected by it, who are, you know, either not choosing to have kids because of the eco crisis, or are wondering on a descendant level what that means. I mean, I know that you can, you know, talk about being an eco-doula, or the term eco-grief, and people experiencing that as they move to connect to what is happening on our planet and connecting to nature in that way. Yeah, what does eco-grief mean? How have you been seeing that in the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so this field of eco-chaplaincy or eco-doulaship really is rather new, emerging over the last few years in response to the frequency of extreme weather events that we're seeing, of how people now all over the globe are being affected by climate change in a very direct way. Of course, communities in the global south have been disproportionately affected for a long time. Now that it's coming into the global north more frequently, let's say the Paradise fires, which happened in California, there was a survivor of that fire who was in my Buddhist eco-chaplaincy program. But there's now this whole world of people that are on a daily basis faced with the existential realities of this planet is dying. What do I do about it? Is there anything I can do? Probably not, which leads to paralysis, which leads to compacting one's sense of fear and anger and sorrow and sadness. That leads to all kinds of symptomology actually within the body. And this is not any different than grief that's unprocessed, any kind of grief. And we know this from, you know, psychology studies, that what remains undigested can lead to coming out in all kinds of different ways. So eco-grief and eco-anxiety have been categorized, and now there are psychometric scales specifically for eco-anxiety and a set of symptomologies to really try to isolate, okay, how is the sixth mass extinction event affecting people, and then how can we show up and support them better? And these symptoms are not necessarily that different than generalized anxiety, but they don't have to coexist. So someone might have really bad, severe, let's say, disruptive eco-anxiety, but they might not suffer from anxiety in general. So they don't necessarily go in parallel, but it can mean someone isn't sleeping well, they're not eating, concern about the planet is disrupting their daily functioning. Could cause headaches, could cause tension in the body. And I think when that's paired with, we're still kind of coming out of this 3-year pandemic. We're seeing almost daily mass shootings in the United States. We're seeing war in Ukraine. We're seeing so much more go really, really wrong around the world. So I think all of that is collapsing on each other and creating multi-layered crises that at its core, the individual is like, oh God, how do I deal with this? How do I survive this? And how do I do that in connection? And I think so much of what's led to the place we're in as a global ecosystem and biosphere is this disconnection from our primary home, which is the earth, the home of our bodies, the home of the earth body. And in that separation, fueled by greed and imperialism and the agricultural revolution, etc., now we're existing as isolated individuals, and the fallout is massive. We're seeing loneliness spikes, depression spikes, suicide spikes. Like, the evidence is really plain and it's really here.
Yeah, it is here, and it's, as you say, it can be big and very overwhelming on the body, very overwhelming on the central nervous system. And as we still haven't seen the impact and the fallout of the last 3 years, let alone the build up, as you say, of what we face on the planet on an environmental crisis level, where I think for me it's I can't remember what the actual date is exactly. That's part of my question. Is that, do you know that there's a date, isn't there? They were saying like, this is the D-Day, like this is the D-Day date. And I think it's there in people's minds. It's there in people's, it's there. They know it's there. But me, case in point, like I know there's a date, but I don't actually know what it is. And it can really impact who we are and what we're about. I found it fascinating that in the that during the pandemic people did return to nature. There was like this natural intuitive instinct that they were going to find solace or answers or a connection in nature, where people realized that they might feel isolated and alone in their houses, or not being able to see friends and family members, or do how they have that connection like they normally do, but that they could find it in nature, and more people were getting out, were visiting local like nature spots. It's really interesting how, on a psychology level, that people were drawn to that during these difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the research on nature connection is very, very clear that there are immense mental health, physical health, emotional benefits of spending time in nature. And the mechanism of that, so it's multidimensional. There's a behavioral, affective, meaning emotional, and a cognitive dimension of this construct called nature connection from a research lens. So spending time with nature, there's no question that benefits us, but my interest has been, okay, but what's happening in that relationship? It's not just necessarily a dosing question. It's not like, okay, if you get 20 minutes a day or an hour a day, or even in a specific type of nature. It's not like necessarily a park affects people more than woods, affects people more than the beach, let's say. But it's more about what's happening when people's bodies are in the body of the earth. Is there availability in the body? So I talk a lot in my research about this interoceptive awareness capacity, meaning the ability for us to sense into what's happening in our bodies, how that relates to emotion, how that relates to then trusting the body. And that's really the common language we have with the earth, the language of the senses. So quite a bit of how one can connect with nature deeper starts with really becoming fluent with the language of the senses of their own bodies, We can't know someone without being able to speak the same language as them, right? And language doesn't mean verbal. I don't mean verbal. And so I love the ability to connect with like nature because it's available to everybody of any kind of body, any kind of ability. There's no one that's left out here. And it's about what is it to fall forward, to follow the attraction, to follow the impulse, and return to kind of this childlike wonder that we all have in us, deeply in us. And something about maybe the pandemic and the slowness like gave people permission to kind of get out there and allow some of that to come forward. And the beauty, these simple little moments that can leave real impressions, right? Because it's like, oh, there's something true happening here. I'm being known by something, and that something is a tree or a plant or this beautiful field or this lovely river. And it's kind of happening in such a way that jumps past cognitive mind and just lands. And then we want to do it again and again, and we want to go back. It's like this is our lover or our friend, and we want to deepen the relationship and the bond and like keep the magic alive.
Yeah, I love how you describe that around having a relationship with nature like you would a friend or a lover. Like that feels, there's a level of intimacy that is being cultivated in that. If so, in your work, is there something like a practice or a ritual that if someone wants to deeper a connection with nature or have that form of ritual to kind of gain that intimacy, is there anything? I know people talk about forest bathing or taking their shoes off and putting their feet on the earth, but is there anything that you have is tried and tested in your from your own body, from your own experiences?
Yes, and this is something that I piloted in my PhD research, and it's so simple, but it's 8 days with the earth and 20 minutes over 8 days with the same place. So the invitation to start with is pick a spot that you can return to consistently. It doesn't have to be a special, super beautiful, perfect spot, just a spot, and get to know that place. And begin on the first day with introducing yourself to this place, like you would introduce yourself to a human being. Say your name, say something about you, and then listen back and spend time really in conversation where you speak or you communicate something with your body. You don't have to use words if that doesn't feel available or feels a little like out of your comfort zone. But then spend time in listening, and you can think of that as mindful attention, mindful awareness. It's really as simple as that. You're just dropping you're dropping the phone, you're dropping your mind from whatever your busyness of that day is, and allowing yourself to be present and available and noticing what comes through. You might actually hear something. And by hear, I don't necessarily, again, mean language, but you might hear with the rest of your being. And that's how a relationship starts. And so that might sound really simple, and it is. But it is unbelievable and so beautiful what can happen in these really simple encounters. So I recommend to give it 8 days, and then after that you can leave it and never do it again. But 8 days allows you to invest enough so that there's the chance for something potentially to, let's say, catalyze or spark between you and this place. And to not get too worried as the days go by about what is happening, and letting the mind just kind of rest into, I'm giving this a go, and not, micro looking at every interaction as, oh, nothing's happening. What should be? Nothing should be or shouldn't be. You're just there, and that's the beauty. You're just being a being.
So it's like making sure you get, give it to, third date or 8 dates versus having a first date and then being like, okay, well, this isn't working and I'm not having the conversations that I need to have and I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And, just by slowing down and then slowing down a little more, we do start to notice and see what is actually really around us and what's there. And all of a sudden, this flower that was just a flower becomes this luminous kind of creature, and you're noticing the yellows in a different kind of way and seeing how the sun hits the leaf in this transparent kind of sparkle, and ooh, that feels like a little buzz in my body, and like, ooh, I now want to like look at this bluebell and just kind of be with it, and wow, that reminds me of my childhood, and this feels sort of sweet in the body, and this is just how it flows. And then all of a sudden you realize that you've fallen in love a little bit.
Nice. Yeah. Because there's a statement that you shared with me before we came on this podcast around the quote from, is it Baba Dioum, in the end, we will conserve only what we love. And I thought that was really powerful, because if you're bringing in that, like that practice, as you say, of like going back to a place and falling in love with it and falling in with nature, it then of course has that relationship to, you know, where there is life, there is death. So there's a connection between, as you open up the portal to loving nature and having that deeper understanding and the wisdom of nature around you, also the connection of honoring the death and the ending surrounding it too. So that's really, really powerful. Have you do you go back to particular places at different types of seasons to see the death? You know, do you have particular places that you love to go to seasonally to see it in life and see it in death too?
Yes, so my family lives in Colorado in the mountains in the United States, and there is a valley that holds a beautiful river and these red rock mountains that turn into these stunning, really jagged peaks that are home to a multitude of aspen tree groves. And the aspen tree is probably my favorite tree, and it's the largest living organism in the world, actually, after mycelium complex. So there's a Pando aspen grove in Oregon. I think it's like 15,000 years old.
Wow.
And so the aspen trees are identical clones of one another, and the way that they live and protect each other feels to me like interconnection embodied, and such a beautiful example and invitation of what it might mean for humans to live as if we really do belong together. So, for example, an aspen tree is not technically a tree, it's a shoot that grows out of a common root. And when one shoot dies, the common root underneath immediately sends up another one. And there's this kind of synergy or dance there that no tree is left to die alone, and no death is unwitnessed and unheld and unacknowledged. There's almost like a ceremony in that to me. And the bark of the tree is this white chalky substance that protects it from the sun, but also humans can use it for aspirin. And I like to go close to an aspen and just kind of like rub my face on the bark, actually. And then the white chalk kind of comes off on me. And there's this, I don't know, it's an intimacy kind of like we're rubbing off on each other and like leaving traces with one another. But in the winter, I mean, so gosh, every season is so spectacular, but the fall where the colors are just electric and then turning into winter, I love winter so much in the mountains because, yeah, the fecund, silent death portal feels so alive, and yet there's so much life within that silence and that great emptiness and expanse, and especially being out in the winter in the mountains where it's snow in all directions. There is this sort of sonic silence that holds you almost like in a womb, and being with these beings, and their leaves are shed, of course, but they're like holding their post in a way. It's like in death, they're waiting and being very patient, and there's no rush. And I can feel the trust that they have for the season that's coming and the spring that will come. But there's no need to bloom. There's full acceptance and full embrace of the emptiness, actually. And in that is its own kind of gorgeous comfort. So breaking kind of the addiction in a way to needing spring or to needing summer, it's like, okay, but what is it to actually really, really embrace what winter has? So yeah, the seasons have been such medicine in teaching me these things.
I feel you on that. I just did a winter in Quebec in Canada, literally living in a forest, and it had the peace and the quiet of that, and how the animals, you know, the deer that were around the other seasons go somewhere particular because they know that that's where they can survive the winter. But walking around within the trees, as you say, there's a patience that rubs off on you, and the knowledge and the wisdom that they have. And then I remember it was really cold, but there was a woodpecker out still going around the dead trees and finding the life within the dead trees. And it was amazing. There was snow on the ground, and this woodpecker was, you know, still at it, still, you know, trying to survive itself. And it was a really kind of powerful kind of message and cycle being shown.
Yeah. This isn't related to seasons, but I think this story really relates. 2 years ago, the wildfires in Northern California were really, really bad, and I just finished the in-person retreat part for the Sati Center for Buddhist Studies Eco Chaplaincy program, and I was on a solo week alone, kind of in Mendocino County. And I was in a redwood forest, and nearby the Caldwell fire was raging. The smoke was filling the air. It was completely black. And I was standing amongst these redwood giants. These are the tallest trees on earth. And feeling into what is their sense of what's happening to their neighbors, as we could almost hear these trees dying, you know, miles away. And I was really struck with this sense of, oh, wow, these trees can't move. They can't escape. They can't run from the flames. They can't run from death. And I felt into the redwoods that I was facing and felt them like waving goodbye to their lovers, and this dignity. I will never forget the way it felt. It felt like this dignity of like, we will stand here, and if the flames come for us, like we will let go too. But until then, their roots are connected underneath, holding each other up, almost in this prayer or this yoga asana, the sun salutation, as the smoke descended down, and I knew that they were starting to choke as well because the air was getting polluted and they couldn't breathe. So that felt like its own kind of, I guess, grief ceremony in a way. And I really wonder what the trees would like of us to accompany them in their death. And that's a lot of what eco-doulaship means, really, is not just, okay, how can the earth support me and what I'm losing and the grief I'm feeling, but I want to turn that question around and ask how can we accompany the earth in what they're losing and what grief they must be facing and feeling. So I think that story was really a catalyst for me in starting to look at that in a flipped way.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, exactly. And as you say, seeing it personalized and seeing that, of course, trees have feelings. Of course, trees have emotions and the connection to that. It reminds me of one of my favorite books is The Overstory by Richard Powers. I love that book. I love the stories. I love the connection of that, and as you were describing it, it reminds me of the section in the book when they're talking about the trees being cut down, the redwoods, and the human element to that. Yeah, it's big. It's a big topic. It's a big energy. What you're sharing and what you're discussing is it can seem that it's not possible for us to do that. How for anyone that's like, oh well, how do I hold place for death in nature? What can I do to do that, to honor the grief that trees are experiencing, or that nature in general is experiencing with the climate crisis? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so there's a variety of directions for that. And one would be kind of holding ritual and ceremony yourself. And I really, really believe in ritual ceremony. We do rituals every day. Some people hear that word and don't feel like they can relate to it. But if you make coffee every day, you know what a ritual is. If you take a shower every day, you know what a ritual is. Um, so it's bringing intention to something and adding a layer of sacredness and love and awareness and wrapping your heart around it and believing that there is energetic quantum entanglement. We know that's true. Could I love you and could that move a butterfly wing on the opposite side of the planet? Maybe. And so rituals, I think, are important, and they're culturally embedded in every culture around the world since all of time immemorial. In the West, we've lost some of them, or they become religion, liturgies in a church or something. But I love to encourage people to free themselves from the notion of what a ritual ceremony is and to follow their own impulse and intuition, make their own. So I can talk about what it might mean to make a ceremony or ritual for those creatures, beings that are dying, almost like you're making a little impromptu funeral or grief ritual vigil. And that can be super simple. You could light a candle and you could say out loud the names of the species that have been lost, let's say, in the last year. It's something I've done. And then sit in 10 minutes of silence and feel that. Feel the grief that they feel. And then close it out. Read a poem maybe or a prayer or write your own prayer. And see what shifts, what opens in you by kind of creating space to honor. So there could be creating your own ritual ceremonies with the intention to honor the life that's being lost. And then secondly, to seek out wounded places on the earth and be there with your body and ask the earth what you might do to help accompany them in their grief. And spoken to quite a few grief workers, plant whisperers actually, who do this in the South. And so a wonderful grief doula named Akua Adisa, they work with plants, and as a Black person, feel very strongly that the southern part of the United States has witnessed incredible violence and death, and they have set out to help the earth heal those wounded spots. And they can tell the difference when they show up on a piece of land. They know if it's wounded because they can feel it. And so they've been doing these rituals with other folks on wounded places of land to alchemize the pain of that earth and alchemize the pain in their bodies. It's quite incredible and powerful. But maybe where you are, there's a piece of land that's also been wounded. If you live by somewhere that's been heavily farmed or is monoculture agriculture or has been over harvested, that's a kind of wound. It doesn't have to be a place where humans have been killed. It could be a place where the land just hasn't been cared for even, or it has been neglected. Maybe there's a part of the park near your house where it's just trashy and kind of a bin. Maybe you could kind of go there and give it some love. Like, oof, what might that feel like to just be so neglected, to be really unseen, uncared for, and kind of allowing your heart to be curious about what hurts in a place, and then enter into kind of a love circle to give them something that they need. And this can feel really, really beautiful and tender, actually, and helps, interestingly, kind of decrease one's eco grief. One would think, oh, the more I spend time in nature, the more I'll care about it, and then I'll have more grief, or then I'll have more eco anxiety. It's actually kind of the inverse. The more we're in relationship with the earth and kind of working to heal each other, working it out in our bodies and their body, the anxiety and the grief kind of go down because there's something happening. It's not just stuffed and stuck. There's movement and flow. And I think that that's really important when it comes to kind of, transforming grief from something stagnant and lead-like to something potent and fertile and kind of transformative.
Wow. Yeah, I love everything that you just shared. It's so like real tangible things that people can do, feel, and take action on. And as you say, it's not just the people-led, trauma, but as you say, whether with the harvest, being over harvest or monoculture, yeah, that is just so dialed in. And I love, and I think people intuitively know that with the land. You know when you can walk on, I know for me personally as a medium, I can walk on to certain bits of land, and I do that. I send healing to it, because you can feel when something is off. I was walking this morning with my dog in a new forest that I'd never been into, and I got to this part of the forest and I suddenly had a wave of anxiety that came up through my body, and it just felt darker and heavier, and the trees you could feel it in the trees as well. And I just said, just sent it some love, sent it some energy, and just was in that space. Because for me, I also taste it. Like I taste it in my mouth. It gets like a metallic taste of when things are off in the land. And the land speaks, the land shares. It's potent when it does that. And it's knowing that, as you don't need to be a medium, you don't need to be psychic to be able to do this. It's an intuition, as you say, that, bringing it back to something that you shared right at the start around giving us the power, working with nature to help us feel in our bodies. And that once there is this kind of symbiotic relationship between the both of them, how it works together and how the energy flows both ways. It's potent.
Yeah. And I really, if people are feeling excited about some of these ideas or kind of drawn to them, and again, don't really know where to start, really practicing mindfulness and openness is so important. That's really kind of the core skill, because if, like you just said, that was such a beautiful example. This wave of anxiety came up and you didn't personalize that. You didn't say, oh, what's happening? What's wrong in my life? Like what's the story attached to this anxiety? And maybe you did, but in what you just said, you just kind of...
It was just, I knew it wasn't mine. That was
Yeah.
for me, I was like, the way it came into my body, it was like, okay, this isn't my anxiety. And it was interesting because the forest felt like it was the old part of the forest. It felt like it was, do you know how some forests feel older than others? You can walk through one body of trees, but the land and the trees feel older. Yeah, that's how it came in.
Yeah. And then you did something there with that. And so you obviously have this availability to be touched and and to sense. And so many people are walking around on this planet calcified and numb and disassociated, and all of that is for lots of really good reasons, and I don't want to diminish that. But in order for us to come into deeper relationship with each other, much less the earth, we have got to come into our bodies and then enter the body of the earth. And that can feel like a really daunting task, especially for someone who perhaps lives with chronic pain, let's say. Being in the body is actually not a very comfortable place to be. Or being in the body brings up really scary feelings and memories and things that are too big to handle. So I say this with a really gentle invitation, and also to go at your own pace and being in your body in a way that actually feels good to you and accessible and available. But I don't want anyone to feel left out of this invitation. And also to say that, this position we've gotten in ourselves in as humans due to so much overconsumption, mass consumption, needing more, the myth of progress, all of that is also serving to numb and disassociate us and sever our ability to have a relationship with the earth. And I'm no different. I live on this planet as well, and also feel that impulse to buy or consume to cover up uncomfortable emotions, or to leave my body because it's a scary place to be. But the earth has taught me so patiently over time what it is to be here. And by be here, it's like be together here in our interconnected, intertwined, tangled glory of life. Like we share the same matter. We're no different from one another. Literally, our cells are made up of the same dust that's on the stars. So there's actually biologically no difference between us. And what is it to actually live as if that's true?
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Because you've been on your own health journey, right? With everything
Mm-hmm.
that was there an aha moment for you when you were feeling pain in your body, things were coming up for you physically. Was there a moment where you were like, I got to get back into nature? What was that shift or that healing drop in for you where you felt like, oh my God, I've reached my ultimate low. I've
Mm-hmm.
faced death. That death in the face moment where you've
Mm-hmm.
reached rock bottom and something's got to shift or change. What was the connection to nature that helped you out of that?
Yeah. Well, I really felt like I was in what the Tibetan tradition calls a bardo, which is
Mm.
this, yeah, liminal state between life and death and rebirth, and just empty, very unknown. I was suffering from a constellation of illnesses and an autoimmune condition and chronic migraine headaches. And it just kind of kept dominoing in terms of symptoms that didn't have clear diagnoses. And Western medicine was really kind of failing to address what it was to live in this body every day, which was starting to limit me more and more and more. And I had to pause my PhD studies. Um, yeah, on a daily basis, I wasn't necessarily functional. I was really facing what is it to lose the function of a body that I've taken for granted my whole life and living in a lot of pain, a lot of pain. Um, so this bardo opened also that timed with the start of the pandemic, also that timed with lockdown. So all of that together kind of coinciding into one mess. And I left New York City where I was living and took refuge in Santa Fe in the deserts in New Mexico. And I'd spent a lot of time in New Mexico, co-leading retreats over the years. And one of my spiritual teachers, a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr, who runs a center in Albuquerque, actually, the Center for Action and Contemplation, says that the earth is the first sacred text. And I had always been drawn to that notion, but it had never really landed for me. I'm not the person that, when I was 8 was like talking to plants. That just wasn't me. And so here I am now in New Mexico, in my bardo, having these physical symptoms just completely render me kind of nearly catatonic and questioning kind of every part of my life, as most of us were during that period, anyways. And I remembered this okay, what the earth, sacred text, like that doesn't really feel alive, but I have no other choice but perhaps to explore if that could be true. And so I just kind of by necessity started spending time on walks in the desert of New Mexico because we were in lockdown and I couldn't spend time with anybody else. And kind of at I can't take credit for this. I didn't set out to build a relationship with the earth or to fall in love with the earth. It's like the earth was like, you're mine and you're coming to me and I'm going to woo you and seduce you, whether whether you want to or not. But I did. Yeah, and so on these walks, like slowly, 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 I started hearing the earth kind of draw me, is how I can put it. And the earth started to love on me, and I started to feel a sense of comfort coming through or a sense of care and tenderness. And I was really, really hurting and felt very vulnerable in my body and my life. And I was surprised and shocked and gratefully, yeah, amazed by this sweetness that I started sensing with the earth, and it kind of grew from there.
Powerful. Amazing. Yeah, as you say, that kind of transformation of the earth letting you know that it's going to be okay. And it's interesting now, here you are writing about, and connecting and sharing about the eco crisis. And now it's our turn to kind of also step up and be like, okay, it's going to, and saying that to the earth as well, like
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be okay, like we got you, we're gonna do this together. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, there's a reciprocality to it now where it feels, and back to what you said with Baba Joom, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Potawatomi botanist, scholar, scientist, researcher, talks a lot about we protect what we love. And there is a necessity of wanting to give back to the earth when one has received so much from it, right? And so I think that that's really important as well here when we think about relationship with the earth. What is it to really be in reciprocity? So, and this also brings in then the streams of intersectional justice. So it's not just about, oh, I'm going to give my love to the earth. It's also, okay, what are the actions I'm really going to take, including justice, land back, reparations, advocacy, policy change. Of course, personal sphere, climate mitigation actions are important, but we know that won't stop anything. And we can't all do everything either, but I really, really implore all of us to consider what is mine to give, and then to give that fully, and to be dedicated to that. And it can take a lot of forms, and it doesn't have to take the form of advocacy or organizing or public protest, but it could take the form of really, really giving yourself to protect. Let's say there's a plot of land that's up for development in your local community, and there's actually something you could do to kind of preserve a biodiverse place where you live. Like, do that.
Yeah.
And as we do, if we're all doing that, there can be actual shifts. And when none of us do, because the problem feels too big, that's how power wins, right?
Exactly. Power wins. It's funny. Yesterday, a friend was sharing she's just moved down to Cornwall, and as a community, through literally lobbying on email, they stopped the building of some houses on a cliff site in Cornwall, just from, contacting the right people, putting the right pressure on it. And then they realized that they had to do, because it was being flagged so many times, they had to do a bigger inquiry onto it, which then meant that it stopped and didn't happen. And
amazing.
And as she said, it took her by surprise, because she didn't realize that through the power of just putting that pressure on, that actually something might change in that. Again, it's that like feeling of hopelessness, that that you can't do something, but taking those action steps actually led to something which kind of has inspired her to do more by doing that.
Of course. And I've interviewed some incredible environmental activists and artists for my PhD, and a lot of them kind of weave this polarity around, this action that you just named, and lobbying efforts, and then the other side of that pendulum being something a bit more magical or mystical, which also really matters. So offering your songs to the earth, offering your love. And we've kind of been talking about that this whole conversation, but they both matter. And I think really sensing into yourself of what is your offering. And that could be something that you ask your place on earth that you love, what they want from you, and listening back to what the answer is, and taking it from there. Just like a relationship with a person. You're like, oh, what do you need? How can I love you better?
What's your love language?
Yeah, how could I do this differently? You might be surprised, like, what you get back.
Yeah, it's a bunch of avoidant human beings that are suddenly realizing that they've got a big avoidant personality trait over the environment.
Exactly.
Classic. Through all your research and the people that you've interviewed, is there anything that you've learned from the Indigenous that has really stuck with you on their take on this with the eco crisis? Is it, from your interviews, is there any Indigenous wisdom that you've really that's really stuck with you?
I mean, first of all, obviously it's just important to name, talking about interpersonal relationality with the earth is an Indigenous view and has been practiced in Indigenous communities really for all of time. So this whole conversation is, is not my idea, or it's not, I don't own these ideas. And no one does really. I mean, these are, I think, really coming from the earth and have been held by communities over time, and then keep evolving and changing, and spit out from different people, different methods and kind of iterations. But yeah, Indigenous people protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, and yet they are the most likely to be affected by climate disaster. Indigenous communities are also 5 times more likely to be arrested or imprisoned for defending and protecting land. So, we have got to realize that one, the health of our planet hinges on a community that is suffering the most because of what the global north has done, and also are the most likely to be prosecuted for doing something about it. It is challenging. Like, you look around and it's like, who is putting their bodies on the line to protect the rainforests or the watersheds or the oceans? It's mostly Indigenous people. And one, their relationship with the earth has been cultivated and is stronger, but they're also living in symbiosis in a way that where they actually need that land to survive more closely than a disconnected global north kind of population. So yeah, it's really important that we think about how to support Indigenous-led protection groups, also Indigenous-led conservation organizations, and there are a lot of really, really great ones out there. And to be students, to learn from them, to really come alongside and listen, and value their perspectives and value their knowledge, and kind of really also consider how to bring them into the halls of power to make decisions and to speak their voice and to give away our power. And by our, I'm speaking as a white-bodied female person from the United States, so I held a certain kind of privilege. And I think the future is absolutely in the hands of the people who have been little heard and little seen, but have all of the wealth of information with the world, but listen.
Yeah, change has got to happen. As you say, the power dynamics have to shift, and it's all part of that role of supporting that change and that awakening and shift to happen. And as you say, that balance of the magic and the actionable steps along the way.
Yeah. And they hold that. Oh yeah.
No, go for it, sweetie.
Oh, they hold that together so well. They're in conversation with plants. They'll say things around how the plants or the trees have directed them in certain ways, and yet they're also, pushing back on the oil refineries or the oil, plants, and the coal production facilities. They're doing both. So I think it's important to recognize that, as well as really hold precious this protection that they've guarded for so long. So yeah.
It's changing times. We live on the knife edge of this life death moment on our planet, and it's what always frustrates me is the world will be here. There might not be any humans, but the planet will be here, and it will regenerate the way it needs to as well. One question I've been asking all my guests is, it's a bit esoteric, but at your moment of passing, when you're crossing over to the other side, who or what, or is there a place in nature which you might take yourself to? Is there a memory of a certain place, a certain tree, or certain people in your life that you think that you'll have those flashback life moments to as you cross over to the other side?
Yeah. I feel that some of those moments I've already experienced them. Not necessarily in a near-death experience kind of way, but in very deep meditation states or other kind of ecstatic states where that has happened. This flood of people, faces, sensations, kind of all happening at once. What I love, who's loved me, what's felt alive, what's felt sad, all of it just kind of explodes in like a constellation galaxy at once. But I do have a sense that my grandmother's presence will be very much with me. She comes to me in very like liminal moments since she died, and I have a very clear sense that she is waiting there or is with me now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the aspen trees, certainly.
Yeah, the
I want to
aspen
be like
trees.
wrapped around them, or I'll
Yeah.
finally be an aspen tree. And
Yeah, come back as an
yeah,
aspen tree.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about the meditation part, because you can get that feeling and that sensation of what we think it will be like when we
Mm-hmm.
move, and have those flashes, or that, stereotypical of how storytelling or films visualize that. But as you say, that can be felt in
Mm-hmm.
meditation or lucid
Mm-hmm.
dreaming, or
Mm-hmm.
journeys that people are
Yes,
taking. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
that's powerful. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom. Where's the best place for people to find more about you?
Thank you so much for having me, and enjoyed this conversation so much. Um, yes, my website is lindsaybranham.com, where you can see kind of my film work and eco-doula PhD work. And then Instagram at Lindsay Loren is where I keep things current and updated. And yeah, I have some courses coming up, one at Kripalu Yoga Center on the wisdom and medicine of trees, and some other things rolling out in the next few months. So if you want to join me for that, would love to have you.
Amazing. Sounds super exciting. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. Bye.